The strategy is to tell the truth.
Okay.
Before you can have international justice, you have to have historical truth. What is never been mentioned in all of this farcical peace process is that 50 years before World War II, the blueprint for the genociding of Palestine was instituted by Theodor Herzl in 1895 when he established the idea to disappear was the euphemism. That is, to genocide the entire population of Palestine and replace it with European Jews. Now, this has no moral right, therefore, for Israel to exist at any point. We have seen the practice of this policy instigated 50 years before World War II. So whatever happened in World War II is irrelevant to the fact that the intention of the Jewish state from its inception was to genocide Palestinians. So this is the first thing we have to understand. The second thing, as I say, there has been a Jewish republic the size of Switzerland since 1828, and there was nothing anti-Semitic about its inception. All of the ethnicities that comprised the Soviet Union were given their regions, their autonomous regions.
But is not the strategy of pointing out this particular aspect of history, is that not simply going to create a sense of fear in Israel, a sense of opposition within the United States, and a sense of raising this spectre within Europe of the accusation of anti-Semitism, which then means that the Germans in particular, but actually the rest of Europe, stands back and says we can't even go there. So it actually has the opposite impact of what you're describing.
We have to do like Khomeini and Hamas do as their role model. We have to stand firm and go to nail the issue. Instead of looking at the wrong symptoms, we should look at the issue. The issue is that Israel has no moral right to exist. It has no need to exist. We have a UN for which 191 nations could, at last, do something useful with the UN and actually propose a resolution to end this farce. There is nothing anti-Semitic about suggesting the European Jews go back to their first homeland, which is safe, peaceful, and no problem to anybody.
Is this practical?
Absolutely practical, because they said that Israel was not going to be practical, and yet our disgraceful governments have facilitated this insane idea only 60 years ago. 60 years ago it was considered unlikely. We can undo a disaster just as well as we can propose a rotten disaster. We can undo the disaster. Much more practical than the concept that these people who fight at the front line for truth for all of us, because we are in war debt. All of our countries, including this one, are occupied countries.
So you want Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and everybody to leave the country?
Absolutely, they have no right to be there. And they are a charity state. You are saying that the Palestinians rely upon charity, but Israel is a charity state. Without the taxpayers of America and other countries, including our own, paying for this criminal state to exist, it's over for them. We stop paying for this criminal state and we give them the opportunity to go peacefully to their Jewish republic.
Sorry, just so that I'm clear, by them, who do you mean?
By them, I mean the European Jews who have occupied Palestine.
What about Arab Jews?
Illegally.
The Arab Jews, about 900,000, who from Morocco, from Egypt. I give you for example.
Yes, and I can ask you
what
this.
What can they do? North African Jews, about 400,000.
Even the Neturei Karta rabbis, the anti-Zionist rabbis, will confess that many of the Iraqi Jews and the other kinds of Jews you're describing, they were terrorized by fantasy anti-Semitism, to flee their good businesses in Iraq and so on, to make up the demographics, to build up the demographics in Israel. They didn't go there for any real sensible reason. They were frightened to go. They were frightened to it.
Would they be accepted again, you think, to go and build their enterprise and business in Cairo and Baghdad? Because I myself have been brought up in Egypt, where from years when I was a little boy in school, to, we were taught how to hate Israel and to hate the Jews. And I remember it very well. We used to sing against them, which I think was total nonsense. And actually, one of the first few books I read in my life was The Elders of Zion in Arabic. Mm-hmm. And of course, for a little boy of 11 or 12, it was very confusing and scary as well. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to look on the world in reality. The Middle East have changed. Is a very big part, up to Benghazi, was part of Egypt till about 1930, for example. When I show to people get shocked. And Alexandrona in Syria. So there have been changes in maps in the world, in the Middle East. And I think we've got to live in peace with Israel. We've got to accept them.
We do not have to accept a criminal state that was created only 60 years ago.
When you say criminal?
It's criminal because I've just explained the intention from the outset when the blueprint was established in 1858.
You said
in 1895. In 1858 is when this country was occupied by Zionists. When Disraeli introduced Rothschilds to represent Britons in Parliament, Jewishness is ethically incompatible with Islam and Christianity.
No.
Absolutely.
I'm a Muslim.
Ethically incompatible, and let me explain why. Because, for instance, every Yom Kippur, Jews have to recite the Kol Nidre prayer. Now, this Kol Nidre prayer says that you can nullify oaths and vows you are going to make in the future. Now, this is especially with non-Jews, because Judaism is anti-Gentile by its own definition. We, as Christians, Muslims, classical tradition of the Greek tradition, cannot understand the concept of making an oath and a vow that you are intending to nullify in the future. It is ethically incompatible. You cannot negotiate with Zionists. This is a fantasy. You've only to go to the Kensington Central Library, get out the Socino Talmud, which will tell you in English that ethically incompatibility is evident in the concept of the Talmud by which Jews read their Judaism. There is no negotiating with these people at all. The best thing for them to do is to have their own homeland and leave our governments in peace. We cannot have ethically incompatible people running our governments, giving us bank loans, creating these inter-gentile wars for which we get deeper and deeper in debt. Everything that the UN has done has facilitated more inter-gentile wars. It's done nothing. We need it to do something at long last, and this proposal makes it possible.
Okay, Wafik.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Egyptian and Muslim, and I say I've been brought up and I've lived the propaganda, anti-Israeli propaganda to the full when I was a little boy, and still I meet actually an old minister, about 92. He's actually happened to be living in London. I had my surgery. And what I would say, the propaganda, anti-Jewish propaganda in Egypt was started by the Nazi remnants which were sent to Egypt because they worked as spies for the Americans and for the British and helped the Allies in winning the war.
But do you see how we always go to the Holocaust, and we always go, you see, Wafik,
I'm talking about...
We always go to the World War II, World War II, World War II, World War II. We never go back. It's always a block, it's a shield. We never go back to the origin of this problem, which is in 1895 and the blueprint for the genocide. It's always...
What do you mean by genocide?
Genocide is to disappear.
Genocide means killing many people in one go, as it happened.
I quote him. Herzl said we will disappear the entire population of Palestine.
No, but do you think
that means genocide.
Oh, I see. You're talking about what
Hitler
you've read.
was aged 8. Hitler was at that time aged 8.
Have you
talking about World War II, only camouflage.
Michèle, have you ever read about genocide? Has it ever took place?
The blueprint is what we see today. The culling of the Palestinians is precisely what Herzl wanted, said and set up, and we see it today. They have no right to an inch of Palestine. They have no right at all.
Wafik, if we're going to look to future solutions here, or future directions, what is the way in which we can achieve a progress that involves negotiating with people in Israel and people in neighbouring countries? What sort of approach could hold a promise of achieving some sort of peaceful coexistence? Does it have to be a two-state solution, which some would say involves ethnically defined states, which surely is a backward-looking solution? It's a solution that comes out of a sort of South African approach, where we define our political structures by the ethnic groups? Or should we be looking beyond that sort of solution towards a state where Jews and Muslims and others can exist side by side?
What I feel personally, again from my background and lived most of my life in England, I would say that there got to be negotiation, genuine negotiation.
There can't be. I've just explained to you.
Go ahead, Wafik. Yes, we've heard, but let me see if we can.
And there got to be normalization of relations between Arab countries and Israel. What I mean by normalization, not just exchange ambassador, is to have warm peace.
Because we've had cold peace for quite some time. The peace between Israel and Egypt has, for the last few decades, been one of cold peace.
Yeah,
absolute disgrace it's been.
Yeah, and it was a deliberate move by Mubarak. It's one of the balancing the cards. It's all Machiavellian. All the Middle East leaders play a terrible, dirty Machiavellian game. But the number of people from West Bank, for example, got to work in Israel is more than 20,000 people. And they actually hardly apply for jobs in the Gulf because they earn almost the same and they can go back to their family after 45 minutes travel. So there is a lot of normalization. The language, you'll find a lot of schools in Gaza and West Bank, they teach Hebrew as a second language or third language. So it is there on the ground. What I want to say, there's a lot of normalization on the ground, which particularly Arab press, Middle Eastern press, don't like to focus on it. Don't like to say it. It's hidden. Sorry? But if you look...
It's not normalization. It is giving up your dignity, your heritage,
If you learn Hebrew language, if I learn English, when I was a child, it made me life to come to England and live in England as a doctor. And without knowing the English language, probably would never have dreamt to come to England. So what I mean... I'm talking about the practical things which people do. We forgot about the leaders of the Arab world and the media.
Egypt needs you. Egypt needs you. England doesn't need you, but Egypt needs you.
I'm under their disposal if they ever want me. I met top generals in Egypt recently to talk to them about Egypt as well and about its channels with the West. But what I would think is important thing for the Palestinians is to look realistically what they can get and build a state, but not to go into little nitty-gritty.
So given that the Palestinians need to look for what they can develop and that's going to require some sort of relationship, as you're outlining, they need to come to some sort of relationship with Israel. I would say they also need to be thinking about relationship with the United States, because that's a key relationship. Now, given that the US representatives this week have been saying that they oppose not just the Security Council resolution, but also a resolution to the General Assembly, which wouldn't even create a state. It would just be recognising that the state of Palestine, the Palestinian entity, is worth recognising, not as a full state, but nevertheless something that's developing. If the Americans are opposed even to that, what hope is there that the Palestinians can develop a constructive relationship with one of their key sponsors that would be required for the sort of development that you're describing?
I think it's going to United Nations now.
Mm-hmm.
Abbas have done something big wrong, and I don't think it will help. It may delay things up. He put some Arab countries, I'm not talking about half of the Arab countries, but I think he put some countries like Egypt under sorts of strain, the government or the street. And I think it was too premature for the Arab world is, as you could see, upside down. I would have waited for a year or two.
Do you not think that the Arab street in Egypt today would not be supportive of the sorts of moves that he's been putting at the UN at the moment?
Well, if you look at the Arab Spring in Egypt,
yes,
in the first several weeks, there was no mentioning of that issue at all, Israel-Palestine issue. It was a domestic problems, education, health, corruption, all that. That was the main thing, transport, but I don't think that was the issue. Because again, Egypt, people, about 40 million Egyptians live under half a dollar a day. I mean, Gaza is considered much better welfare, for example, comparing to some places in Egypt. And that is we have to realize that. I mean, I know the propaganda and the songs, but the reality is different. And I think Abbas should have looked at it, particularly he hasn't got Gaza behind his back. Where he is going, he hasn't got Hamas supporting him. They're keeping quiet, and they're going to make trouble later